They gave us the rotation like it was a posting, not a posting to history. Sergeant Deva Oren, breaching Team 7, ins, Cauldron Gate. Report to Corridor 31 by 0600 and stand ready for customs interdiction support. That was the language on the orders. Customs interdiction support. As if we were dock police. As if the Cauldron Gate was a patrol cutter and not 400 meters of reinforced strike. Carriers sitting at the mouth of the threshold alongside 9 other ships of the line. I had been on the gate 11 months by then. I knew her rhythms. The way she hummed at station keeping. A low bone-deep vibration you felt in the soles of your boots more than heard. The way the lights in the breaching corridors shifted from white to amber when the external airlocks pressurized. I had walked Corridor 31 200 times in drills and twice in live actions. A smuggler intercept near Kantara Station. A medical emergency assist on a Sarathi freighter. Nothing that resembled what was coming. Team filed in at 0550 and we ran our checks without being told to. 9 people. Tasco on my left, big-shouldered, moving his neck the way he did when he was working loose tension. Preddy and Voss behind him, carbines slung, visors up. Lamb and Dre and old Corporal Henricks, who had been doing this longer than some of us had been alive. We did not speak much. We had been together long enough that speech was mostly redundant before an action. The diplomatic situation, and I use that word carefully, was this. The Vethis Combine had controlled the threshold transit corridor for something, close to 3 centuries. Not owned it in any legal sense a human court would recognize, controlled it the way a tollkeeper controls a bridge, by being the only one willing to stand on it with a club. They were a merchant civilization, the Combine. That is not quite right either. They were a civilization whose merchant apparatus had long since consumed the governmental one, so that there was no meaningful distinction between a Combine trading factor and a Combine fleet commander. Commerce and force were the same instrument, deployed at different volumes. They had met humanity twice before, briefly, at the outer edge of Combine space. Those were probe contacts, a single vessel each time, scientific survey ships, no weapons of consequence. The Combine had logged humanity in their ledgers the way they logged every emerging species. Potential transit fee revenue, assessed for threat at the lowest bracket. They had extended the threshold offer to us 6 standard months ago. Passage rights in exchange for a percentage of cargo value on every human ship that used the corridor. Standard terms. The same terms they imposed on the Cathari when the Cathari needed to cross Combine space to reach their colony systems. The same terms they had imposed on 8 other species in this arm of the galaxy. The diplomatic mission was meant to negotiate, to counteroffer, to find terms both sides could hold. The Cauldron Gate and her 9 escorts were there because an unarmed diplomatic frigate in Combine space was a frigate that would not come home. That was the calculation. A carrier group would not be boarded, would not be impounded, would not be levied a holding fee in the Combine's territorial water the way smaller ships routinely were. Carrier group was a statement of standing, of seriousness. What it was, apparently, was also something the Combine had not factored into their ledger. I got the word at 0612. The Combine's Enforcer Squadron, 6 vessels, their equivalent of a Customs and Compliance flotilla, standard configuration for extracting compliance from uncooperative trading partners, had detached from their anchorage at Threshold Station and was moving to match with us, not moving to an intercept or a defensive posture, moving to board. The flagship of our diplomatic mission, the frigate Inns Ardent, had received a Combine transmission, standard boarding protocol, comply and extend docking collar, routine commercial inspection, per Combine Transit Regulation, Article 14. They had sent that transmission to a carrier group. I remember Tasco reading the summary on his wrist display and turning to look at me with an expression that was not quite disbelief and not quite amusement. Something in between. They do know what she is, he said. They know what she is, I said. They just don't think it changes anything. We had 12 minutes before the Combine Enforcer lead ship reached docking range. Corridor 31 sealed around us, and the amber lights came on. Here is the thing about the VS Combine, that their ledger models had never been forced to price. They had spent 300 years dealing with species who needed the threshold. The Cathari needed it. The Sura Compact needed it. Every species the Combine had logged, assessed, and extracted transit fees from had needed something the Combine could withhold. The Combine's leverage was always the corridor. Control the corridor, control the species. Humanity did not need the threshold. We wanted it. There is a difference. Faster transit times, lower fuel expenditure, a shorter route to 7 contested colony systems. Yes, we wanted it badly enough to send a carrier group to negotiate. But wanting is not needing. And a species that wants, rather than needs, sits differently in a corridor. When someone tries to board their ship without permission, I do not know exactly what the Enforcer crew saw when their lead vessel matched velocity with the Cauldron Gate. I know what they had sent to other species. A 6-ship flotilla was usually enough to make a trading partner's diplomatic mission comply with anything, because a 6-ship flotilla docking collar to collar with a vessel could cut power, cut comms, run an armed boarding party through the corridors, seize cargo manifests, and have the whole thing documented and filed with Combine Transit Authority by end of shift. It was a machine the Combine had run many times. The machine ran into the Cauldron Gate. Not literally. Nothing was fired. No collision occurred. What happened was this. Our escort formation tightened. 9 ships that had been holding a loose station-keeping spread drew together into a screen formation around the carrier, the pattern our doctrine calls close escort, and which any trained military observer would read as an active combat envelope. The gate herself rotated 20 degrees on her vertical axis, which moved her main sensor array to direct bearing on the Combine flotilla, and also, incidentally, brought her ventral weapons deck to facing. She did not power weapons. She did not need to. The ventral deck of a Terran heavy carrier carries 42 gun emplacements and 6 missile batteries. The deck alone is larger than the Combine's lead Enforcer ship. And in Corridor 31, 9 Marines stood in amber light and waited. We waited 11 minutes. The Combine's lead ship cut its approach velocity at 400 meters and held position. No transmission for 90 seconds. Then the channel opened, and it was not Article 14 anymore. It was a request, careful, precise, phrased in the transactional language the Combine used for counterparties they were reassessing, for a direct channel to our diplomatic mission. Tasco let out a breath. I kept watching the corridor door. The Enforcer squadron did not come through it. They held position at 400 meters for 3 hours and 40 minutes, while the factors negotiated with our diplomatic mission aboard the I do not know everything that was said. I know the outcome. Passage rights granted. A fixed transit tariff, low, flat, and non-adjustable, is not how the Combine had structured the deal for the Kethari or the Sura Compact. I know that the senior Combine factor who signed the agreement filed a supplementary commercial assessment report with Combine Transit Authority the following day, reclassifying humanity from the lowest threat bracket to a category the Combine used for exactly 4 other species in the known galaxy, a category their ledgers described, in translation, as parties of consequence. We did not celebrate in Corridor 31. We stood down, cleared our weapons, racked the carbines, and walked back toward the billets in single file. Henrik stopped to get water from the dispenser by the secondary airlock. Tasco said something quietly to Preddy, and she gave a short nod. I walked to the observation blister on Deck 7 before I turned in. The threshold was visible from there. The corridor mouth, a faint gravitational shimmer. The Combine's Enforcer squadron, still holding at distance, while their flagship docked at Threshold Station for the formal ratification. I watched it for a while. Here is what I had understood, standing in that amber corridor, that I think the Combine's ledger had missed entirely. The 9 people on my team had not been standing there for the Combine. We were not there to impress anyone, to project anything, to perform a demonstration of capability. We were standing in that corridor because that is what we do. Because that was our rotation, and we work our rotations, and we trust the people beside us to work theirs, and that is the whole of it. The Combine had sent 6 ships expecting compliance. They found 9 humans who had not been told to be impressive, only to be ready, and could not tell the difference. That is what got logged in the ledger as a party of consequence. I do not know whether that is something to be proud of. I know it is something to understand. I went to sleep in my rack with the gate still humming in the soles of my feet, and the threshold Corridor, opened for the first time in 3 centuries without a toll keeper in it.